The pen felt heavier than it should have. Clara Weston stared at the divorce papers spread across the polished mahogany table, her fingers trembling slightly as she gripped the Mont Blanc pen. 37 pages. 3 years of marriage reduced to 37 pages of legal jargon and asset divisions that gave her absolutely nothing. Sign faster. We don't have all day. Her mother-in-law's voice cut through the silence like a razor. Victoria Mercer sat across the conference table in her signature Chanel suit, diamonds dripping from her ears and wrists, looking at Clara the way someone might look at a stain on expensive carpet. Clara didn't look up. She turned to page 12. "Did you hear me?" Victoria's manicured nail tapped against the table. "My son has important matters to attend to. Unlike you, he actually has a life worth living." The law firm's conference room was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan's skyline. Original artwork worth more than most people's homes. A crystal chandelier that probably cost more than Clara had earned in her entire life working double shifts at the hospital. She turned to page 13. Mother let her take her time. Daniel Mercer, her soon-to-be ex-husband, leaned back in his leather chair with a smirk playing on his lips. It's the last time she'll ever sit in a room this nice. Let her enjoy it. The woman sitting next to Daniel giggled. Sophia Chen, 24 years old, senior vice president of marketing at Mercer Industries, a position she'd earned entirely through her talents, according to Daniel. The fact that those talents were primarily displayed in his penthouse bedroom was apparently irrelevant. Sophia's hand rested on her stomach, 4 months pregnant. Clara had found out 3 weeks ago when Victoria had announced it at a family dinner, beaming like she'd just won the lottery. Finally, Victoria had said, raising her champagne glass, a grandchild from a woman with actual breeding. Not some orphan trash Daniel picked up out of pity. Clara turned to page 14. You know, Sophia said, examining her fresh manicure, I was thinking we could turn her room into the nursery. It gets the best morning light. Excellent idea, darling. Victoria smiled warmly at her. We'll have the decorators in by next week. Clara, you'll be out by tonight, correct? I've already had the staff pack your things. 3 boxes. That's all you had after 3 years. Quite pathetic, really. Clara's jaw tightened. 3 boxes. They'd given away her mother's jewelry, the only thing she'd had left of her parents. Donated to charity, Victoria had claimed, for the tax benefits. She turned to page 15. The conference room door opened quietly. No one noticed. They were all too focused on watching Clara's humiliation like it was their favorite entertainment. An elderly gentleman stepped inside. Silver hair. Expensive charcoal suit that somehow looked more refined than anything the Mercers wore. He moved silently to a chair in the corner, near the back of the room, and sat down. The Mercer family's lawyer, a rat-faced man named Patterson, glanced over briefly, then returned his attention to Clara. Just another observer, probably someone from the building. Clara turned to page 20. You know what I never understood? Daniel stretched his arms behind his head. Why my father made me marry you in the first place. Some dying wish nonsense about your mother being his college friend. What a waste of 3 years. Your father was a sentimental fool, Victoria said coldly. Thank God he's not here to see you correct his mistake. In the corner, the elderly gentleman's eyes flickered. Just slightly. A muscle in his jaw twitched. I gave everything to this family, Clara said quietly. It was the first time she'd spoken since entering the room. Victoria laughed. Everything? What everything? You had nothing to give. No money, no connections, no family. Just a pretty face and a sob story about being an orphan. She leaned forward. Do you know how embarrassing it was, telling our friends that my son married some nobody? I had to lie and say you were from a European family that lost their fortune. Even that was too generous. Clara turned to page 25. At least she's signing without making a scene, Sophia said. I heard some ex-wives cry and beg, so undignified. Oh, Clara knows better than to beg, Daniel smirked. She learned early that it doesn't work in this family. Remember when she begged us not to fire her from the hospital, Mother. That was entertaining. Victoria examined her nails. One call to the board chairman, that's all it took. 3 years of medical school gone in one afternoon. The elderly gentleman in the corner slowly pulled out his phone. His movements were deliberate, controlled. He began typing something. Clara turned to page 30. I have a question. She looked up for the first time directly at Daniel. Was any of it real, even at the beginning? Daniel's smirk faltered for just a moment. Something flickered in his eyes, guilt, maybe, or the ghost of whoever he'd been before his mother had molded him into this. Then it was gone. Does it matter? No, Clara returned to the papers. I suppose it doesn't. Victoria clapped her hands together. Oh, this is perfect. Patterson, make sure the confidentiality clause is ironclad. I don't want this creature going to the press with stories about my family. Already handled, Mrs. Mercer. Patterson pushed his glasses up. She's prohibited from discussing the marriage, the divorce, or any member of the Mercer family for the rest of her life. Violation carries a penalty of $5 million. Which she could never pay, Victoria smiled. Perfect. Clara turned to page 35. Almost done. You know what the best part is? Sophia twirled a strand of hair around her finger. We're going to announce the engagement at the Hampton Gala next month. All of New York society will be there. Everyone will see that Daniel upgraded. Significantly upgraded, Victoria agreed. The elderly gentleman set his phone down. His expression hadn't changed, but something in the room shifted. The temperature seemed to drop by several degrees. Clara reached page 37, the signature line. Wait, Victoria held up a hand. Before you sign, I want you to say it. Clara looked up. Say what? That you're grateful. Victoria's smile was cruel. For 3 years, you lived in my home, ate my food, wore clothes I bought. You should thank me for not throwing you out on the street the day after the wedding. The conference room fell silent. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Even he seemed to recognize this was excessive. Mother, that's not. Say it. Victoria's voice turned to ice. Say, thank you, Mrs. Mercer, for tolerating my worthless presence in your family. Say it, or I'll make sure you leave this building with nothing. Not even those 3 pathetic boxes. Clara stared at her. 3 years of insults. 3 years of being treated like dirt beneath their designer shoes. 3 years of watching her self-worth get chipped away, piece by piece, until she barely recognized herself in the mirror. She thought about her mother, a woman she barely remembered who had died when Clara was 4. She thought about growing up in foster homes, working 3 jobs to put herself through medical school, building a life from absolutely nothing. And she thought about dignity, the one thing they could never take from her, no matter how hard they tried. No. Victoria blinked. Excuse me. I said no. Clara's voice was steady. I won't thank you for making my life miserable. I won't pretend you did me a favor by treating me like garbage. And I won't give you the satisfaction of breaking me in front of your lawyers and your son's pregnant mistress. The room went dead silent. Victoria's face turned red. How dare you? I'm signing the papers. Clara picked up the pen. I'm walking out of here with nothing, just like you wanted. But I'm walking out with my dignity intact. And that's something you'll never have, no matter how many diamonds you wear or how many people you step on to feel important. She signed her name, Clara Weston, clean and clear. There, she set the pen down. We're done. Victoria stood up so fast her chair scraped against the marble floor. You ungrateful little. That's enough. The voice came from the corner of the room. deep, authoritative, the kind of voice that made people stop talking and listen. Everyone turned. The elderly gentleman rose from his chair. In the light, his features became clearer. Sharp blue eyes that held decades of power and experience. A face that had graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune more times than anyone could count. Patterson's face went white. Mr. Ashford. Victoria froze. Who? Jonathan Ashford. Patterson's voice cracked. Founder and chairman of Ashford Industries. The name hit the room like a bomb. Ashford Industries, the largest private conglomerate in North America, real estate, technology, finance, healthcare. A business empire worth over $90 billion. Jonathan Ashford, the man who had built it all from nothing, who sat on the boards of the most powerful companies in the world, who had been called the most influential businessman of the century. And he was standing in this conference room, watching their divorce proceedings. I don't understand. Victoria's composure cracked. Mr. Ashford, we weren't expecting. This is a private family matter. I apologize for any inconvenience. If you need the conference room. I don't need the conference room. Jonathan Ashford walked forward slowly. His eyes never left Clara. I've been looking for someone for 28 years. Clara stared at him. Something about his eyes. Something about the way he looked at her. It triggered a memory she didn't know she had, a man's face, blurry and faded, singing her a lullaby in a language she didn't understand. I don't, she shook her head. I don't know you. No, Jonathan's voice softened. You don't. But I know you, Clara. I've known where you were for the past 6 months. I've watched you work double shifts at the hospital. I've watched you donate half your salary to the children's ward. I've watched you endure 3 years of hell in this family without ever losing your kindness. Victoria stepped forward. Mr. Ashford, I'm sure there's been some mistake. Clara is an orphan. She has no family, no connections whatsoever. Jonathan finally looked at Victoria. The temperature in the room dropped another 10 degrees. Is that what you told her? His voice was quiet, dangerous. Is that what you believed when you stole her mother's jewelry, when you destroyed her medical career, when you made her clean your bathrooms like a servant in her own home? Victoria's face drained of color. How do you? I know everything. Jonathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a photograph. Old, faded, but preserved carefully. He held it up for the room to see. A young couple. A man who looked remarkably like Jonathan, 30 years younger. A woman with Clara's exact eyes, her exact smile. And between them, a baby girl with a small birthmark behind her left ear. Clara's hand moved involuntarily to the spot behind her own ear. The birthmark she'd had her entire life. This was taken 32 years ago, Jonathan said. 3 years before your mother died. 3 years before I lost you both. The photograph trembled in his hand. Your mother was my wife. Her name was Eleanor Ashford. His voice cracked on the name. And you, Clara, you are my daughter. The pen slipped from Clara's fingers. It clattered against the table in the silence. That's impossible, Daniel sputtered. She's a nobody, an orphan, she told us herself. She told you what she believed. Jonathan's eyes turned to ice as he looked at Daniel. What was true, as far as she knew? Her mother died in a car accident when Clara was 4. The only family Clara had left was her grandmother, who raised her until she passed away. What Clara didn't know, what no one knew, was that I've been searching for her since the day her mother took her and disappeared. He turned back to Clara. His expression softened. 28 years of pain and longing lived in that look. Eleanor and I had a fight, a stupid, meaningless fight about my work schedule. She was upset. She took you and drove to her mother's house in Connecticut. There was a storm. A truck driver fell asleep at the wheel. He paused, swallowed. I was told you both died. Your grandmother identified the bodies. She blamed me for the fight, for Eleanor leaving. She raised you under her maiden name and told you your father had abandoned you before you were born. Tears were streaming down Clara's face now. She didn't even notice. I found out the truth 8 months ago. Jonathan's voice was barely above a whisper. A private investigator discovered discrepancies in the accident report. Your grandmother's confession letter was found after her death. She wrote it all down. How she'd lied. How she'd hidden you from me. How sorry she was. He reached out and gently touched Clara's cheek. His hand was trembling. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner. The conference room was absolutely silent. Victoria had gone pale as a ghost. Daniel looked like he might throw up. Sophia had shrunk back in her chair, one hand protectively over her stomach. And Patterson was already mentally calculating how many lawsuits were about to rain down on the Mercer family. Clara looked up at the man claiming to be her father, the billionaire, the chairman of Ashford Industries, the most powerful businessman in the country. You were watching, she said slowly. This whole time, you were sitting there watching them treat me like that and you didn't say anything. Jonathan's jaw tightened. I needed to see. I needed to see who they really were when they thought no one important was watching. I needed to see if you were really the daughter Alina raised, the kind, dignified woman who wouldn't break no matter how hard they pushed. He smiled then, despite the tears in his own eyes. And you are. God help me, you are exactly who your mother would have wanted you to be. Victoria suddenly lurched forward. Mr. Ashford, Jonathan, may I call you Jonathan? This is wonderful news. Clara, darling, why didn't you tell us about your family connections? We had no idea. Stop. One word. That's all it took. Jonathan Ashford didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. You had no idea. He turned slowly to face Victoria. You had no idea that the woman you forced to scrub your toilets, the woman you called orphan trash, the woman whose mother's jewelry you stole and whose career you destroyed, you had no idea who her family was. Victoria's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Let me be very clear, Mrs. Mercer. Jonathan straightened his cufflinks, a simple gesture that somehow radiated absolute authority. I am not a forgiving man, I am not a merciful man, and I am not a man who forgets. He pulled out his phone. 6 months ago, when I discovered my daughter was alive and married into your family, I began a comprehensive investigation. I have documentation of every contract Mercer Industries has ever violated, every tax evasion scheme, every bribe, every safety regulation ignored, every worker exploited. The blood drained from Victoria's face. Additionally, I have evidence that your son has been embezzling from his own company's pension fund for the past 2 years. Not much, just $800,000. Enough to fund his lifestyle while the company struggles. Enough to send him to federal prison for a minimum of 15 years. Daniel went white. That's a lie you can't prove. I can prove everything. Jonathan smiled coldly. I have forensic accountants who have done nothing but analyze your company's books for the past 4 months. The evidence is ironclad. He turned to Patterson. You're fired, by the way. Ashford Industries holds the lease on this building, and I'm fairly certain representing a client in a divorce proceeding while concealing evidence of spousal abuse violates at least 6 different bar regulations. Expect to hear from my legal team within the hour. Patterson went green. Mr. Ashford, I had no idea. Save it for the disciplinary hearing. Jonathan turned back to his daughter. His expression transformed entirely, from cold fury to gentle warmth. Clara, sweetheart, you don't have to sign anything. This marriage can be annulled based on the fraudulent circumstances under which it was arranged. You won't owe them a cent. You won't be bound by any of their ridiculous confidentiality clauses. And you certainly won't be walking out of here with 3 boxes of whatever scraps they deemed acceptable for you to keep. Clara stared at the divorce papers on the table, her signature on page 37. I already signed. I know. Jonathan reached down and picked up the document. He looked at it for a long moment. Then he tore it in half. Father, Daniel shouted, what are you? She's not your daughter anymore, Mr. Mercer. She never was. Jonathan tore the papers again and again. Pieces of the document fluttered to the table like confetti. Clara Weston doesn't exist anymore. She never existed. There is only Clara Ashford, sole heir to the Ashford Industries fortune, and as of approximately 10 minutes ago, the new majority shareholder of Mercer Industries. The silence that followed was deafening. What? Victoria's voice came out as a croak. Jonathan smiled. It was not a kind smile. Did I forget to mention that part? While you were busy humiliating my daughter, I was busy purchasing 51% of your company's outstanding shares through a network of shell corporations. The transaction completed at, he glanced at his watch, 10:47 this morning, about 15 minutes before this meeting started. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He slid it across the table to Victoria. Congratulations, Mrs. Mercer. You now work for my daughter. Victoria picked up the paper. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely read it. But Clara could see the letterhead, the official stamps, the numbers. Ashford Industries had just acquired controlling interest in Mercer Industries. Her husband's family company, the source of all their wealth and power, the foundation of everything they'd used to make her feel worthless. It now belonged to her. This can't be legal, Daniel stammered. There are regulations, notifications, board approval. All handled. Jonathan waved a hand dismissively. I have very good lawyers, much better than the ones your mother hired to bully my daughter into an unfair divorce settlement. He placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. Now, sweetheart, I believe you have a choice to make. As the new majority shareholder of Mercer Industries, you have the authority to make some significant changes to company leadership. Clara looked at her father. The word still felt foreign in her mind, impossible. Then she looked at Victoria, who was crying now, actual tears streaming down her face, smearing her perfect makeup. At Daniel, who looked like his world had just collapsed. At Sophia, who was edging toward the door, clearly trying to figure out how to escape. 3 years. 3 years of being nothing, of being less than nothing. And now, with a single word, she could destroy them all. Clara took a deep breath. I need time, she said quietly. I need time to process all of this. Jonathan nodded. Of course, sweetheart, take all the time you need. He snapped his fingers. The conference room door opened. 4 men in dark suits entered. Behind them, a woman in an impeccable gray dress carrying a tablet. This is my security team, Jonathan said. And my personal assistant, Margaret. They'll ensure you're not bothered while you process. He turned to Victoria one last time. Mrs. Mercer, I suggest you start packing. Clara may be merciful enough to give you time to find alternative employment, but I wouldn't count on her generosity lasting forever. He paused. Oh, and one more thing. He walked over to Daniel, stood directly in front of him. Even at 73 years old, Jonathan Ashford was an imposing presence. If you ever speak to my daughter again, if you ever look at her, contact her, or so much as breathe in her direction, I will personally ensure that the federal investigation into your embezzlement results in the maximum possible sentence. Do we understand each other? Daniel nodded frantically. He looked like he might pass out. Excellent. Jonathan turned back to Clara and offered his arm. Shall we, sweetheart? I have a car waiting downstairs. I thought we might have lunch and talk, if you're willing. Clara looked around the conference room one last time. At the torn divorce papers. At the Mercers, huddled together in terror. at the life she was leaving behind. Then she looked at the man who claimed to be her father, the man who had apparently spent 28 years searching for her, the man who had just casually destroyed the people who had made her life hell. She had 1,000 questions, 1,000,000 doubts. She didn't know if she could trust him. She didn't know if any of this was real. But she knew one thing for certain. She was done being Clara Weston, the orphan nobody. She took her father's arm. "Lunch sounds nice," she said. And together, they walked out of the conference room, leaving the ruins of the Mercer family behind them. The Rolls-Royce Phantom glided through Manhattan traffic like a shark through water. Silence filled the cabin, not uncomfortable, but heavy with everything unsaid. Clara stared out the tinted window. Her reflection looked like a stranger. Same brown eyes, same dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, same second-hand dress she'd worn to sign away her marriage. But everything was different now. "You're quiet," Jonathan said from beside her. "I expected more questions." "I have questions." Clara didn't turn from the window. "I'm just not sure where to start." "Start anywhere. We have time." She finally looked at him, really looked, searching for something familiar, something that proved this wasn't an elaborate dream or cruel joke. "Why didn't you fight harder?" Jonathan's expression flickered. "I'm sorry." 28 years. Clara's voice was steady, but her hands trembled in her lap. "You said you thought I was dead, but you're Jonathan Ashford. You have resources most people can't imagine. Investigators, lawyers, connections. Why did you just accept it?" The question hit him like a physical blow. She could see it in the way his shoulders tensed, the way his jaw tightened. "Because I was broken." His voice came out rough. "Your mother was everything to me. When they told me she died in that accident, when they told me my baby girl was gone too, I wanted to die myself." He turned to face the window on his side, hiding his expression. "I threw myself into work, built the company into what it is today, told myself that a leaner would have wanted me to keep going." He paused. "But the truth is, I was running from the grief, running from the guilt. If I stopped moving for even a moment, I would have to face the fact that my wife and daughter were dead because of a stupid argument about missed dinners." Clara watched his reflection in the window, saw the tear that escaped down his weathered cheek. "Your grandmother counted on that," he continued. "She knew I was drowning. She knew I wouldn't dig deeper, wouldn't question the official reports, wouldn't demand to see the bodies." "You never saw them." "Closed casket funeral. Your grandmother insisted, said the accident was—" He swallowed hard. "She said it was too devastating, that I shouldn't remember a leaner that way." The Rolls-Royce turned onto Fifth Avenue. Outside, tourists and business people rushed past, completely unaware of the earthquake happening inside this car. "I buried 2 empty caskets," Jonathan's voice cracked. "For 28 years, I visited those graves every Sunday, brought flowers, talked to headstones, and the whole time you were alive, growing up thinking your father abandoned you." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Anger, yes, but also something else. Something that felt dangerously like compassion. "My grandmother told me you were a deadbeat." She said it flatly. A fact. "Said you got my mother pregnant and disappeared, said you never wanted me." Jonathan flinched like she'd slapped him. "She was protecting you, in her own twisted way." He turned back to face her. "Eleanor's mother never approved of me, thought I was too ambitious, too focused on building my empire. She blamed me for every late night, every missed birthday, every time your mother cried because I was stuck in a meeting." Was she wrong? The question hung in the air. "No," Jonathan's admission was barely audible. "She wasn't entirely wrong. I was obsessed with success. I told myself I was building something for my family, but the truth is I was building something for myself, for my ego." He took a shaky breath. "Your mother and I were in counseling, trying to work through it. That's why the fight happened. She wanted me to cut back to 40 hours a week. I said it was impossible. She said I was choosing work over her, over you. And then she left. And then she left, took you to her mother's house for the weekend, said she needed space to think. His voice went hollow. 3 hours later, a state trooper knocked on my door. The car pulled to a stop. Clara looked up. They were parked in front of a towering glass building, the Ashford Industries headquarters. 73 floors of steel and glass dominating the Manhattan skyline. I thought we were going to lunch. We are, Jonathan gestured toward the building. The executive dining room has the best chef in the city, but I wanted you to see this first. Clara stared up at the building, her father's empire, her inheritance. I don't want your money. The words came out before she could stop them. If that's what this is about. Clara, Jonathan's voice was gentle. Look at me. She did. His blue eyes, her eyes, she realized now, were filled with something she hadn't expected. Vulnerability. I don't want to buy your love. I don't expect you to forgive me for missing 28 years of your life. I don't expect anything at all. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was warm, strong. I just want the chance to know my daughter, whatever that looks like, however long it takes. Clara felt tears threatening. She blinked them back. I need to understand something first. She pulled her hand away. The Mercers, you said you've known where I was for 6 months. Yes. You watched me suffer for 6 months. You could have intervened at any time. Why did you wait until today? Jonathan's expression hardened slightly. Because I needed evidence. Not just of who you are, but of who they are. I needed documentation of every abuse, every cruelty, every illegal act. If I had revealed myself too early, they would have been on their best behavior. I would have saved you from a bad marriage, but they would have walked away unscathed. So you used me as bait. The words landed like stones in still water. Yes, Jonathan didn't flinch from the accusation. I used you as bait. I let them continue hurting you so I could build a case that would destroy them completely. And I will carry the guilt of that decision for the rest of my life. Clara studied his face, searching for deception, finding only painful honesty. It was wrong, he continued. I know that. I told myself I was protecting you in the long run, but the truth is, I was also protecting myself. If I had shown up 6 months ago, you might have rejected me. You might have chosen to stay with them out of spite, just to prove you didn't need a father who appeared out of nowhere. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that you would hate me. His voice broke on the last word. Afraid that, after 28 years, I would finally find my daughter, and she would want nothing to do with me. The admission hung between them, raw and exposed. Clara thought about the past 6 months. The escalating cruelty, Victoria's constant insults, Daniel's growing coldness. The moment she discovered Sophia's pregnancy and realized her marriage was truly over. This man, her father, had watched all of it, had the power to stop it at any moment. But instead, he'd gathered evidence, built a case, waited for the perfect moment to strike. It was cold, calculating, ruthless. It was also exactly what she would have done. I don't hate you, Clara surprised herself with the words. I don't know what I feel, but it's not hate. Relief flooded Jonathan's face. He aged 10 years in that moment, then seemed to shed 20. That's enough. He smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen. That's more than enough. The driver opened Clara's door. She stepped out onto the sidewalk, craning her neck to see the top of the Ashford Industries building. One more question, she said as Jonathan joined her. The Mercers' company, you really bought controlling interest. 51.3%, to be exact. Why not just destroy them? Why give me the power to decide? Jonathan offered her his arm again. This time, she took it without hesitation. Because it's not my revenge to take. He led her toward the building's entrance. They didn't hurt me. They hurt you. Whatever happens to them should be your choice. They walked through the lobby. Security guards straightened to attention. Receptionists stared openly. Whispers erupted in their wake. Clara ignored all of it. Her mind was spinning with possibilities. The embezzlement, she said as they entered a private elevator. Daniel's pension fund scheme. Is the evidence really that solid? Ironclad, I have bank records, wire transfers, emails. He used a shell company in the Caymans to funnel the money. Thought he was being clever. Jonathan pressed the button for the 73rd floor. Would you like to see the files? Yes. Clara watched the floor numbers climb. And I want to know everything else. Every dirty secret, every illegal deal, everything Victoria and Daniel thought they'd hidden. Jonathan's smile turned proud. You sound like your mother. I thought you said she was kind. She was, but she was also fierce when someone threatened the people she loved. The elevator doors opened onto a breathtaking view of the city. Eleanor would have burned the Mercers to the ground for what they did to you. She just would have felt bad about it afterward. Clara stepped into the executive floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, priceless art. The kind of wealth that made the Mercers look like pretenders. I won't feel bad. She turned to face her father. I want them to suffer. I want Victoria to know what it feels like to be powerless. I want Daniel to understand what he threw away. And I want Sophia to realize that she backed the wrong horse. Jonathan studied her for a long moment. Pride and concern warred in his expression. Be careful, sweetheart. Revenge can consume you. I've seen it destroy people far stronger than the Mercers. I'm not looking for revenge. Clara walked to the window. Manhattan sprawled beneath her like a kingdom waiting to be claimed. I'm looking for justice. There's a difference. Is there? She turned to face him. In the sunlight, her eyes blazed. Revenge is emotional, impulsive. It ends when the anger fades. She lifted her chin. Justice is systematic, permanent. It changes the rules of the game so no one else has to suffer what I suffered. Jonathan was silent for a long moment. Then he laughed, a genuine, delighted sound. My God, you really are my daughter. He walked over and stood beside her at the window. What did you have in mind? Clara's smile was sharp enough to cut glass. First, I want to see the company files. All of them. I want to understand exactly how the Mercers built their empire and where the cracks are. Done. Second, I want to meet with your legal team. If I'm going to dismantle Victoria's world, I want to do it properly. No loose ends. I'll have them assembled within the hour. Third, Clara paused. This was the part that scared her. I want to visit my mother's grave, the real one, not the empty casket. You said her body was identified by my grandmother. Where is she actually buried? Jonathan's expression softened with grief. Connecticut, a small cemetery near your grandmother's house. I only discovered it 2 months ago. He placed a hand on her shoulder. I've been waiting for you to ask. Clara blinked back tears. I thought I'd processed her death years ago, when I was a kid, but now you have to grieve her all over again, as an adult, with the truth. She nodded, unable to speak. We'll go together, Jonathan said quietly, whenever you're ready. Before Clara could respond, the elevator doors opened again. A woman in a sharp navy suit stepped out. Margaret, the assistant from the law firm. Mr. Ashford, I apologize for the interruption. Her voice was crisp, professional. But there's a situation developing. Victoria Mercer is on her way here. Clara's eyebrows shot up. Here, to Ashford Industries. Apparently, Margaret consulted her tablet. Security called from the lobby. She's demanding to speak with Mr. Ashford. She claims she has information that will change everything. Jonathan sighed. The woman never did know when to cut her losses. Should I have security remove her? Clara held up a hand. No, let her up. Both Jonathan and Margaret looked at her in surprise. "Are you sure, sweetheart? You don't have to face her again so soon." "I want to hear what she has to say." Clara turned from the window. Something cold and determined had settled in her chest. "Besides, I have a few things to say to her myself." Jonathan studied his daughter for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Send her up, Margaret, and make sure our legal team is watching on the security feed." Margaret disappeared into the elevator. Clara smoothed her second-hand dress, the same dress she'd worn to sign divorce papers just 2 hours ago. She looked completely out of place in this penthouse of wealth and power. But appearances were deceiving. "You know," Clara said casually, "Victoria always said I had no breeding, no class, no social graces." "Victoria is a fool." "Maybe," Clara smiled. "But she was right about one thing. I was completely unsuited to be a Mercer." The elevator doors opened. Victoria Mercer stepped out like a queen entering a conquered territory. Her Chanel suit was immaculate. Her makeup had been freshly reapplied. Her diamonds caught the light with every movement. But her eyes told a different story. Panic lived behind that practiced composure. Desperation lurked beneath the aristocratic tilt of her chin. "Mr. Ashford." Victoria strode toward them with manufactured confidence. "Thank you for seeing me. I realize our earlier encounter was contentious, but I believe we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement." Clara stepped forward. "Hello, Victoria." Victoria's mask slipped for just a moment. Surprise, confusion, and underneath it all, fear. "Clara, I didn't expect you to be here." "Where else would I be?" Clara gestured at the sprawling office. "This is my father's building, which means eventually it will be mine." The words hit Victoria like a slap. Her composure cracked further. "Yes, well," she cleared her throat. "That's actually what I wanted to discuss. This sudden revelation about your parentage. It's all very convenient, isn't it?" Jonathan's voice went cold. "Choose your next words carefully, Mrs. Mercer." "I'm simply pointing out the obvious." Victoria pulled a folder from her designer bag. "Anyone can claim to be someone's long-lost relative. It happens all the time to wealthy families. Con artists, fortune hunters, delusional individuals with fabricated sob stories." She opened the folder with a flourish. "I've taken the liberty of having my own investigators look into this matter, and I've found some very interesting inconsistencies in Mr. Ashford's story." Clara laughed, actually laughed. Victoria's eyes narrowed. "I don't see what's amusing." "You are." Clara walked toward her former mother-in-law. "You really think you can bluff your way out of this, with fake documents and manufactured doubts?" "These documents are not fake. They prove that your mother, Eleanor Weston, was never married to Jonathan Ashford. She was a secretary at one of his companies who had a brief affair with him, and my mother's maiden name was Eleanor Grant." Clara's voice was calm, lethal. "She changed it to Weston after faking her death and moving in with her mother. My grandmother's name was also Weston, Patricia Weston, née Grant. These are all facts that can be verified with about 10 minutes of research." Victoria's face went pale. That doesn't prove." "I have DNA results." Clara held up her phone. "My father had them run 3 months ago, 99.9% match. I'm his biological daughter." "DNA can be fabricated." "By whom? By me. The woman you called an orphan with no resources or connections." Clara stepped closer. "Or by my father, the man with more lawyers than your family has ever met. Who exactly do you think fabricated this, Victoria? And why?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed. No words came out. "Here's what's actually going to happen." Clara began circling her former mother-in-law like a shark scenting blood. "You're going to leave this building. You're going to go home and start packing your belongings. Tomorrow morning, You're going to receive official notice that your position as Mercer Industries board chair has been terminated." Victoria found her voice. "You can't do that. The board." "The board answers to shareholders, and as of this morning, I own 51% of your company." Clara stopped directly in front of Victoria. "I can do whatever I want." "Daniel will fight this. The family will." "Daniel is going to be too busy fighting federal charges to worry about board seats." Clara smiled coldly. "Did you know about the pension fund embezzlement? I'm guessing you did. Mothers usually know when their sons are stealing." Victoria's face went from pale to green. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The forensic accountants say otherwise. $800,000 funneled through a shell company in the Caymans over the past 2 years. Wire transfers, email authorization, all of it traced back to Daniel." Clara leaned in close. "And about 30% of it traced back to you." Victoria staggered back. "That's a lie." "Is it?" Jonathan spoke up for the first time. "Would you like to see the evidence? I have copies right here." He gestured to Margaret, who had silently returned with a stack of documents. She placed them on a nearby table. Victoria stared at the papers like they were venomous snakes. "This is entrapment," she whispered. "This is harassment. I'll sue you. I'll destroy you both." "With what money?" Clara's voice was almost gentle, almost pitying. "Once the federal investigation begins, your assets will be frozen. Your accounts will be scrutinized. Every luxury you've ever enjoyed will be questioned and documented." She picked up the top document from the stack, held it up so Victoria could see. "This is a summary of the safety violations at Mercer Industries manufacturing plants. 347 violations over the past 5 years. 12 workplace injuries that were covered up. 2 deaths that were ruled accidents despite evidence of negligence." Victoria's face crumpled. Those were handled internally. They were buried. Clara set down the document and picked up another. "This is a record of environmental violations at your chemical processing facility in New Jersey. Illegal dumping. Falsified reports. A cancer cluster in the surrounding neighborhood that your company's lawyers paid to keep quiet." "You can't prove." "I can prove everything." Clara's voice rose for the first time. "Do you understand that, Victoria? Every dirty secret, every bribed official, every life you ruined to build your precious empire, I have it all documented." She dropped the papers on the floor at Victoria's feet. "So here are your options. Option 1, you cooperate fully with the federal investigation. You testify against Daniel. You provide evidence of every illegal act you've witnessed or participated in over the past 30 years. In exchange, you might avoid prison time." Victoria was crying now. Real tears, not the performative ones from the law firm. Option 2, you fight this. You hire lawyers. You drag this out as long as possible. And I spend every penny of my father's fortune making sure you and your son rot in federal prison for the rest of your lives. Clara crouched down to meet Victoria's eyes. "I grew up with nothing. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through medical school. I survived foster homes and poverty and loneliness that would have broken someone like you in a week." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "You really think I'm afraid of a fight?" Victoria's legs gave out. She collapsed to her knees, designer suit crumpling against the marble floor. "Please," the word came out as a sob. "Please, I'll do anything, I'll give you anything, just don't destroy my son." Clara stood up slowly, looked down at the woman who had tormented her for 3 years, the woman who had called her trash, who had stolen her mother's jewelry, who had orchestrated the destruction of her medical career. 3 years ago, I begged you not to have me fired from the hospital." Clara's voice was distant, cold. "Do you remember what you said?" Victoria shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You said, begging is for people who have something to offer. You have nothing." Clara turned and walked back to the window. Manhattan sprawled below her, golden in the afternoon sun. Get out of my father's building, Victoria, and pray that I'm in a merciful mood when the time comes to decide your fate. Margaret stepped forward. Security will escort you out, Mrs. Mercer. Two guards appeared as if summoned by magic. They helped Victoria to her feet, not roughly, but not gently either. As they guided her toward the elevator, Victoria looked back one last time. Her makeup was ruined, her composure shattered. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who had finally met someone she couldn't bully, bribe, or break. You'll regret this, she whispered. Both of you. Clara didn't turn around. Goodbye, Victoria. The elevator doors closed. Silence filled the penthouse. Clara stood at the window, watching the city move far below. That was impressive. Jonathan's voice was soft, terrifying but impressive. I learned from the best. Clara finally turned to face him. 3 years of watching Victoria manipulate everyone around her. I paid attention. Clearly, he walked over and stood beside her. Are you all right? Clara considered the question. Her hands were steady. Her heart rate was normal. She felt calm, centered, more like herself than she had in years. I'm better than all right. She looked up at her father. I think I finally understand who I am. And who is that? Clara smiled. It was Aline's smile, fierce and kind and absolutely unstoppable. I'm Clara Ashford, and I'm just getting started. 3 weeks changed everything. Clara stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her new penthouse apartment, a gift from her father that she'd initially refused and eventually accepted. The woman staring back at her was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the second-hand dress. Gone was the exhausted slump in her shoulders. Gone was the haunted look in her eyes. In her place stood someone new, someone powerful, someone wearing a custom Valentino suit that cost more than her entire wardrobe from her previous life. The car is ready, Miss Ashford. Clara turned to find Margaret standing in the doorway. In the 3 weeks since the divorce confrontation, Margaret had become something between an assistant and a friend, the first real friend Clara had made in years. Thank you, Margaret. Clara picked up her briefcase. Italian leather, monogrammed with her new initials. Is my father already at the courthouse? He arrived 20 minutes ago. The press is already gathering outside. Clara nodded. Today was the day. Daniel Mercer's arraignment hearing. The culmination of 3 weeks of investigations, depositions, and carefully orchestrated legal maneuvering. The federal prosecutor had been thrilled to receive Ashford Industries' comprehensive evidence package: embezzlement, tax fraud, securities violations, environmental crimes. The list went on for 47 pages. Daniel was facing a minimum of 15 years in federal prison. Victoria had taken option 1, full cooperation in exchange for immunity from prosecution. She'd spent the past 3 weeks providing testimony against her own son, her voice growing more hollow with each deposition. Clara almost felt sorry for her. Almost. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt different than it had 3 weeks ago. Back then, she'd been a stranger in this world of wealth and power. Now, she was beginning to feel like she belonged. The doorman nodded respectfully as she passed. Good morning, Miss Ashford. Good morning, Thomas. She knew his name now. She knew all their names. It was a small thing, but it mattered. Clara refused to become the kind of person who treated staff like furniture. The Rolls-Royce was waiting at the curb. Clara slid into the back seat and found her father already there, reviewing documents on his tablet. You look ready, Jonathan said without looking up. I am. He finally met her eyes. Pride shone in his gaze. Have you decided what you're going to say to him? Clara had thought about this moment for 3 weeks. What she would say to Daniel when she finally faced him again. What words could possibly capture everything she felt? The betrayal, the anger, the strange grief for the man she'd thought he was. I'm not going to say anything. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Nothing. He doesn't deserve my words. Clara watched Manhattan scroll past the tinted windows. He had 3 years to hear me, 3 years to see me. He chose not to. Why should I give him anything now? Her father was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Your mother would be proud of you. The words hit Clara harder than she expected. She blinked back sudden tears. Tell me about her, she said softly. Not the sad parts. Tell me something happy. Jonathan's face transformed. The hardened businessman disappeared, replaced by a man lost in tender memories. She used to sing in the shower, terribly, completely off-key. She knew it too. She'd do it louder just to make me laugh. He smiled at the memory. And she couldn't cook to save her life. Once she tried to make me a birthday cake and somehow set the oven on fire and froze the batter at the same time. I still don't know how that's physically possible. Clara laughed, a real laugh bubbling up from somewhere deep inside. She sounds wonderful. She was. Jonathan's voice went soft. She was the best person I've ever known, and I see so much of her in you. The car pulled up to the federal courthouse. A crowd of reporters surged toward them, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward. Ready? Jonathan asked. Clara straightened her shoulders. Ready. They stepped out together. The noise was overwhelming, shouted questions, clicking cameras, the buzz of a story too juicy to ignore. Miss Ashford, how does it feel to be Jonathan Ashford's secret daughter? Is it true you were married to Daniel Mercer for 3 years? What do you say to reports that this is all an elaborate revenge scheme? Clara walked through the chaos without responding. Her father's security team formed a protective bubble around them, guiding them up the courthouse steps. Inside, the noise faded to a respectful hush. This was a place of law and consequence. Even the most aggressive reporters knew better than to cross the threshold. The courtroom was already packed. Clara spotted Victoria in the front row, looking like she'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Her designer clothes hung loose on her frame. Her perfectly styled hair had gone gray at the roots. Their eyes met. Victoria looked away first. Clara took her seat beside her father, directly behind the prosecutor's table. The defense attorney, some hotshot Daniel had hired with the last of his unfrozen assets, was shuffling papers nervously. Then the side door opened. Daniel Mercer entered in handcuffs. Clara had expected to feel something. Triumph, maybe. Satisfaction, vindication. Instead, she felt nothing. The man shuffling toward the defense table bore little resemblance to the Daniel she'd married. His expensive haircut had grown out. His designer stubble had become a patchy beard. His eyes, those blue eyes that had once sparkled with charm, were hollow and haunted. He looked broken. Good, whispered a voice in Clara's head. Then immediately, no, not good, just done, finished, over. Daniel's eyes scanned the courtroom. When they landed on Clara, he froze. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. 2 people who had shared a home, a bed, a life. 2 strangers who had never really known each other at all. Daniel opened his mouth like he wanted to say something. His lawyer grabbed his arm and pulled him down into his seat. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The hearing began. Clara listened to the charges being read. Embezzlement in the 1st degree, securities fraud, tax evasion, conspiracy to commit environmental crimes, wire fraud, money laundering. Each count was a nail in Daniel's coffin. Each piece of evidence was a door slamming shut on his future. The prosecutor was methodical, devastating. She laid out the case with surgical precision, using the evidence Clara's father had provided as the foundation for an unassailable argument. Daniel's lawyer tried to object, tried to argue entrapment, illegal search, prosecutorial overreach. The judge shut him down each time. When the prosecutor finished, she turned and nodded to Clara, a small acknowledgement of everything that had led to this moment. The judge set bail at $15 million, an amount Daniel couldn't possibly pay with his assets frozen. He would remain in custody until trial. As the guards moved to escort Daniel away, he suddenly pulled against them. Clara. The courtroom went silent. Clara, please, I need to talk to you. Just 5 minutes, please. Clara didn't move, didn't respond, didn't even blink. I know I hurt you. I know what I did was wrong. But you have to understand, my mother, she controlled everything. I didn't have a choice. Mr. Mercer, the judge's voice cracked like a whip. You will remain silent or I will have you gagged. Daniel's mouth snapped shut. Tears streamed down his face as the guards dragged him toward the exit. At the last moment, just before he disappeared through the door, Clara spoke. Daniel. He stopped, turned. Hope flickered in his eyes, desperate, pathetic hope. I forgive you. The words landed like bombs in the silent courtroom. Daniel's face crumpled. Clara, thank you, thank you. I promise when this is over we can. I forgive you, Clara continued, her voice steady and cold, because holding on to anger would give you power over me, and you don't deserve that power anymore. She stood, met his eyes one final time. But forgiveness isn't the same as reconciliation. I will never speak to you again. I will never think of you again. You are nothing to me now, less than nothing. She picked up her briefcase. Goodbye, Daniel. She walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The hallway was empty except for her father, who was waiting by the window. That was unexpected, he said quietly. Which part? The forgiveness. Clara joined him at the window. Outside, the reporters were still gathered, waiting for someone to emerge with a statement. My grandmother, your mother-in-law, she spent her whole life angry. Clara watched a pigeon land on the windowsill. She was angry at you for taking her daughter away, angry at the world for taking her daughter permanently. She let that anger consume her until there was nothing left but bitterness. She turned to face her father. I don't want to become that. I don't want to spend the rest of my life defined by what the Mercers did to me. So I'm choosing to let it go, not for Daniel's sake, for mine. Jonathan studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into a hug. It was awkward at first. Neither of them was used to physical affection. But Clara felt herself relax into it, felt something warm bloom in her chest. Your mother would be so proud, he whispered. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. They separated. Clara wiped her eyes when had she started crying, and straightened her suit. I have a meeting at 2:00, the hospital board. Jonathan's eyebrows rose. They called you. I called them, Clara smiled. It's time to get my medical career back. 3 weeks ago, she would have been terrified of that meeting. Walking into a room full of people who had fired her, who had believed Victoria Mercer's lies, who had tossed her aside like garbage. Now she owned 30% of the hospital's parent company. A gift from her father, one she'd actually asked for. They're going to offer you whatever you want, Jonathan said. Chief of surgery, hospital director, whatever you ask for. I know, Clara checked her reflection in the window, but that's not what I want. What do you want? To start from the bottom, finish my residency, earn my position the same way everyone else does. She met her father's confused gaze. I don't want to be given anything, Dad. I want to build something myself. The word slipped out before she could stop it. Dad. She never called him that before. Jonathan's eyes went glassy. He turned toward the window, but not before Clara saw the tears. Whatever you want, sweetheart. Whatever you want. 6 months later, Clara stood in a cemetery in Connecticut. The headstone was simple, white marble, elegant but understated. Eleanor Grant Ashford. Beloved wife and mother. In her smile, the sun rose. Clara knelt and placed a bouquet of white roses against the stone. Her mother's favorite flower, she'd learned that from Jonathan's endless stories. "Hi, Mom," her voice came out thick. "Sorry it took me so long to find you." The wind rustled through the oak trees overhead. Somewhere a bird was singing. "Dad's here too. He's giving us privacy, but he's here. He comes every Sunday now, just like he used to visit the empty grave." Clara smiled through her tears. "He talks about you all the time. I think I know you better now than I ever did when you were alive." She traced her fingers over the carved letters. "I'm a doctor now. Well, almost. I have 6 more months of residency, and then I'll be fully certified. I'm specializing in pediatrics. I want to help kids who don't have anyone else to help them. Kids like I was." The wind picked up, carrying the scent of fresh grass and spring flowers. "I know you probably wouldn't approve of everything I did, the way I handled the Mercers, the revenge, even if I called it justice." Clara paused. "But I think you'd understand. I think you'd know that sometimes you have to fight back. Sometimes you have to show people that kindness isn't weakness." She stood slowly, her knees aching from kneeling on the cold ground. "Dad says I'm just like you. I hope that's true. I hope I can be half the person you were." She touched the headstone one final time. "I love you, Mom. I'll come back soon." Clara walked back toward the cemetery entrance where Jonathan was waiting beside the car. He looked older in the sunlight, more fragile, but his eyes were bright, alive in a way they hadn't been when she'd first met him. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Everything's perfect." Clara took his arm. "Let's go home." 1 year later. The ballroom of the Ashford Industries headquarters had been transformed into a winter wonderland. White lights twinkled from every surface. Ice sculptures gleamed beneath crystal chandeliers. A 12-piece orchestra played softly in the corner. The annual Ashford Foundation Charity Gala was in full swing. Clara stood near the bar, watching the city's elite mingle and gossip and write checks with too many zeros. This was her world now. Not by birth, she'd never forget where she came from, but by choice. "You look like you're plotting something." She turned to find Margaret standing beside her with 2 glasses of champagne. "I'm always plotting something." Clara accepted a glass. "It's how I stay entertained at these things." "Anything I should know about?" "Just thinking about the announcement." Clara nodded toward the stage where a podium had been set up. "I'm nervous." "You, nervous?" Margaret laughed. The woman who stared down Victoria Mercer without blinking. The woman who rebuilt her medical career while simultaneously restructuring a Fortune 500 company. That woman is nervous. That woman didn't have to give a speech in front of 500 people. "You'll be fine." Margaret squeezed her arm. "You're Clara Ashford. You can do anything." The orchestra finished their piece. Jonathan took the stage, tapping the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the 10th Annual Ashford Foundation Gala." Applause rippled through the crowd. As most of you know, this past year has been one of significant change for our family and our company. We've faced challenges. We've overcome obstacles. And we've discovered that the greatest treasures in life are often the ones we thought were lost forever. His eyes found Clara in the crowd. She smiled. "Tonight, I have a very special announcement. As of January 1st, I will be stepping down as CEO of Ashford Industries." Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Whispers erupted. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Jonathan held up a hand for silence. "I'm not leaving the company. I'll remain as chairman of the board, offering guidance and support whenever needed. But it's time for new leadership, fresh perspectives, the next generation." He extended his hand toward Clara. Please join me in welcoming the new CEO of Ashford Industries, my daughter, Dr. Clara Ashford. The applause was thunderous. Clara walked to the stage on legs that felt like jelly, her heart pounding so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Her father embraced her at the podium, whispering in her ear, "I told you, you can do anything." Clara stepped up to the microphone. 500 faces stared back at her. Billionaires, politicians, celebrities, the most powerful people in the country. "Thank you," her voice was steady, calm. "A year and a half ago, I was signing divorce papers in a conference room, being told I was worthless, that I had no family, no future, no value." The room was absolutely silent. I believed them. For 3 years, I believed I was exactly what they said: nobody special, nobody important, nobody at all. She gripped the podium. But here's what I've learned since then. Our worth isn't determined by the people who try to tear us down. It isn't measured by our bank accounts or our social connections or our family names. Our worth comes from who we choose to be when everything is taken away. Clara looked out at the crowd, at the powerful, the wealthy, the privileged. When I had nothing, I chose kindness. When I was attacked, I chose dignity. When I was given power, I chose justice. She paused. And now, as CEO of this company, I choose purpose. She smiled Elinor's fierce, kind smile. The Ashford Foundation will be tripling its charitable giving this year. We're launching a new initiative to provide free health care to underserved communities. We're funding scholarships for first-generation college students. And we're creating a legal defense fund for victims of domestic abuse and workplace harassment. The applause started again, genuine this time, enthusiastic. My mother taught me that privilege is a responsibility, not a reward. My father taught me that power should be used to protect, not to destroy. And my own experience taught me that everyone deserves a chance to become who they're meant to be. Clara raised her champagne glass. So here's to second chances, to found families, to the people who refuse to stay down when life knocks them down. 500 glasses rose to meet hers. To the future. She drank, and the ballroom erupted in celebration. Later, after the speeches and the dancing and the endless handshakes, Clara stood alone on the executive balcony. The city glittered below her like a carpet of stars. Jonathan joined her, moving slower than he used to. Age was catching up with him, though he'd never admit it. "Hell of a speech," he said. "Hell of a year." They stood together in comfortable silence, father and daughter, watching the world they would reshape together. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened?" Clara asked finally. "If grandmother hadn't lied, if you'd raised me from the beginning?" Jonathan considered the question. "Sometimes, but I've learned that wondering about alternate paths is a good way to miss the one you're actually on." Very philosophical. "I'm old, we get philosophical," he smiled. "Besides, I think everything happened exactly the way it was supposed to. The struggles you faced made you who you are. The challenges shaped you. The pain taught you compassion." Clara thought about that, about foster homes and double shifts and a marriage that had slowly crushed her spirit, about divorce papers and a man in the corner of a conference room who had changed everything. "Maybe you're right." "I'm always right. Ask anyone." He put an arm around her shoulders. "Welcome to the family business, Dr. Ashford." Clara leaned into his embrace. Below them, the city pulsed with life and possibility. "Thanks, Dad." She smiled up at the stars. "I think I'm going to like it here." And somewhere, somehow, she could have sworn she heard her mother's off-key voice, singing in the wind. If you enjoyed this story, tap the like button below. If you felt something, anger at the Mercers, tears for Clara, satisfaction at the ending, leave a comment telling me your favorite moment. And if you want to hear more stories of underdogs rising up and claiming their destiny, subscribe now and ring that notification bell. Because every nobody has a story worth telling. And this is just the beginning.